Line Radio. We'll be right back.
Break. Break.
Welcome back, listener. How are you? We're glad you're doing well. This is Aaron Richmond on 87.1 Caroline Radio, KCGM Bakersfield, Blind Advocate Radio, and wherever you get your podcasts, because this is Aaron's opinion. All right? We're having a very serious and a very important and a very needed discussion, I think, with Chris Williams, the co-founder of, that's fine, the co-founder of Life Without Cite. Let's get a little lighter, all right? And let's talk about the now. Let's talk about your YouTube channel, what you're doing, what your goals are. Tell us about some exciting stuff for that. Go right ahead.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. So yeah, we all know in darkness there's always light. So once you get past the morning kind of period, you'll still go through seasons and stuff like that, but it won't be as hard. You'll remember that you got yourself back out. So I took all of my negative from the whole situation and I looked at it from a positive light. So, like I said before, I was part of a couple motorcycle clubs. One of them ended up being a outlaw club. So who knows where I would be right now had I stayed or had I kept my sight. So sometimes I feel and I know that the blindness actually saved me from making a bunch of mistakes. So that's definitely good. It brought me closer to my family. It brought me back in touch with the stuff I love. So, obviously I love motorcycles and I can't do them right now, but I will again. I know I will one way or the other. So I just
and that's wonderful. Just out of interest. So let me put it into perspective, and you'll especially appreciate this. So I do have usable vision, by the way. But I tell people, I can't see well enough to drive a car, but I do see well enough to drive a Segway electric scooter. As a matter of fact, my brother and I, a couple of days ago, we just bought some brand new Segway ES1s, and that's a lot. Those are wonderful. That's a lot of fun. So I can imagine. Well, probably not because I've never driven a motorcycle, but I can sort of vaguely picture what that would be like. And if you have usable vision, being able to drive a vehicle, even around your block or community where you live, that's just a very soothing, that can be a very refreshing activity that just kind of helps you to relax and just sort of feel good. Like, oh, okay, we're zipping around the neighborhood. This is pretty cool. It's pretty inspirational. So maybe after this episode, I can inspire you to maybe get a Segway scooter. They're really amazing. Even blind people who used to be in motorcycle clubs can have them. So probably if you're used to a motorcycle, it would be a breeze. They're brilliantly made. I got to say, the technology and electric technology for like batteries and scooters and that engineering is just. I was on it yesterday. When you're sitting on your seat, perfectly balanced, perfect rhythm. You feel perfectly relaxed with your scooter. It's like just cruising around. It's perfect. God, it's just so. It really feels good. So I can imagine how that must have been a big hobby for you, motorcycles. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
What was the long? Well, seriously, get a scooter, get a Segway, or get another motorcycle. Keep your motorcycle license and just drive perfectly and don't get pulled over and don't tell anyone you're blind.
That would be ideal, but I don't think I have enough usable vision to do it. Just to be honest,
I
I'd
see.
love to
How
navigate.
much vision does it take to drive a motorcycle? Do you have to see well enough to drive a car? Like how much more vision does it take to drive a motorcycle, do you think?
Exactly, because
Oh, that.
it would take, yeah, it would definitely take more just because, you're coming up fast and the way I rode, like you have to have really good vision, at least you know,
Okay, so
yeah,
you're basically alluding to the fact that your
yep,
reckless driving and your reckless technique would not suit a blind person. Well,
no, not at all, not at all.
and specifically what type of motorcycle? What brand?
So what for me, I actually started like most people do. They start on sport bikes, which I started. My first bike I ever owned was a Yamaha R1, and then from there I just went through every bike I ever wanted, because I've always been the type of person that if I wanted something, I'm going to figure out a plan. I'm going to get it. So my mom was very, God rest her soul. She was a fantastic parent, single mom to six of us. And
Hmm.
so
Ooh la
she
la.
literally, yeah, literally was like, if you want something, you're going to earn it and go get it. So I was like, okay, and I just always had that mentality. So, ended up going through every sport bike that I ever wanted. And then I got to the point where, it was like right when I turned 37 when I first bought my house. So I ended up trading a really cool bike I had. I went from the fast wheelie bikes to wheelie on the freeways and stuff and doing dangerous stuff like that to a really just fast bike that won't wheelie, that just goes really fast in a straight line. And then like, I need to slow down. So I ended up ending, which I sold it a couple of years ago, but I ended up ending with a Harley Davidson Road Glide. So I had like
Oh,
a really,
wonderful.
yeah, really loud stereo on it. Like you could hear me coming
Cool,
from
cool.
blocks.
Oh, yeah, the Harleys, they're
Yeah.
famous,
Yep.
and also too, I think with the Harley Davidson brand, I think it's also the culture and the spirit that's associated with that too.
Yep. Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, that's what. No, I totally get what you're saying. How you have to work up to it because when I was in middle school and I got into electric scooters, I had a Schwinn that was only a 350 power engine, 350
Mhm.
watt. Yeah, the engineers will correct me in the audience. One of those two,
Yeah.
350 watts. And now this Segway we have, it's like a 750. And I'm
Okay.
glad that I started off on the 350 because that 750, man, you tap that throttle, bing, there it goes. Like wow,
Yeah.
that's like you have to have the physical maturity to understand this thing's going to give you a kick. It's a lot harder. But I was telling my brother, I say I'd rather have a bike with a lot of force and a lot of power and that's a lot faster because then I have a lot more control. So
Yeah.
I'd rather have that. But cool. So all right, back to your YouTube channel.
Okay. Yeah, for
What's
sure.
your what's your content on that? Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I actually wanted to take my, I always say this, I take my personal experience and apply it for everyone to think about it from a different perspective because we all know when we're going through something, we think it's the end of the world. We think that no one else feels the way we feel, but the difference is most of us actually do. So I figure I put myself out there like, hey, I've been through this, what I'm going through. I felt like this in this situation, but through going through it, by just being strong and reaching out and not being afraid to, like when someone's like, hey, if you ever need anything, let me know, not being afraid to actually cash in that card. It's got me through a lot. So I definitely wanted to share that, my experience, like my whole journey with my blindness. And like I said before, like I'm definitely a bike lover and a car lover. I'm actually on my channel right now. I'm actually put together a car. I had a buddy actually help me do the engine, but for the rest of it, I did myself. So I'm putting together a car, and it will actually, at some point, probably in the next 6 months, be drivable for someone that is blind.
Well, amen to that. That's really
Yeah.
that's really cool. Yeah, you were saying that about the car. I remember that I was watching some live video that you put together about
Yep.
that very topic, and you said car in that, and then I was like, oh yeah, he did say that to me. I was watching your live video, so. Another fair question, another really fascinating topic, similar to the scooter and the bike and these types of things that blind people can sort of drive. At what
Mhm.
point do you think that blind people will be able to actually go to a car dealership and say, "Hey, I'm blind. Okay, I'm here to buy my car." Like when would it get to that point? another thing that's going to sound bizarre to you is I've been blind my whole life, and when I
Mhm,
turned 16, I had no interest in having a car. I never
mhm,
it just never occurred. It never bothered me that I didn't have a driver's license. So I don't know.
mhm.
What do you think about all of that?
Oh, so yeah, when it comes down to that, like to be honest with you, I personally believe the technology is there 100%. It's kind of been shown a little bit like through just Tesla, for example, and other things. Like my belief is that the technology is way there. It's already there. Most cars stop themselves and they brake and all that stuff like that. I just personally feel like, it becomes a problem because there's so many loopholes. If you think about it, it's like, let's say for instance, like we're both blind and we know we're not driving personally ourselves, but our car's driving for us. We go out to a bar, we drink, we get pulled over, like, hey, I'm not driving. I mean, it kind of puts a loophole, it kind of puts a loophole in, like,
I don't.
ticketing or just other stuff.
It's funny. It's funny you bring up that this is hysterical. Uh, family friend, not really a friend of my parents,
Mhm.
happens to be. It's hysterical that you give that exact example. He happens to be a criminal defense lawyer,
uh,
and once my father was asking him that same question, he said, "So Thomas, let's call him Thomas. So
yeah.
so so Thomas, if a blind person's driving a car, or really if anyone's driving a driverless car, right, and they're
Mhm.
drunk, then does that still count as a DUI?" And then
Yep.
the lawyer, the distant friend, he was like, I don't know. That's a good question. So
Hmm.
we're gonna, just like everything else with society, we're going to have to work that out to decide, well, are you driving? If the car is driving for you,
Exactly.
that's the law will have to have a discussion with judges, and they'll have to write legal code about that. If you're driving, probably the answer is that the owner of the vehicle is still the captain of that vessel.
Yep. You're still
So
in control of it. So
probably
yep.
probably they would be able to argue that you're still held to competence, and that you still
Yeah.
need to be able to not manage to get completely hammered,
Yep.
because that could influence your decision for what you tell the computer. So I kind of think it's amusing, but it's also a shaky argument. I don't know how they
Yeah.
would really view that. It's interesting. And then what about the other thing? So then how would blind people get around this? How would blind people get to a point where does a blind person need to have a special license to be able to buy a driverless car? I don't know. What do you think about that?
So I think when it comes down to it in the end, like I said before, about the just the liabilities and all the underlying gray areas when it comes to it with the law, it's going to be, I think the other biggest issue wouldn't even be licensing. I think that it would be a lot of insurance. So insurance, like how would they go ahead and, insure a car where someone has A, either never driven, or B, can't see to drive. So they don't
Hmm.
know how that person's going to drive. So when it comes down to it, I don't think a special license would be needed. I mean, I just think that it would all have to do with like what they say when it comes to the laws for it, if they like balance out the gray areas and stuff like that, and if insurance will, go ahead and actually insure someone. So I know that they insure people that literally don't have licenses, which is usually you weren't allowed to do that back in the day, but I know they switched it
Next
up a lot.
next question. Why would they? How I okay, that doesn't really make any sense to me. But I don't know. I'm blind. I don't drive, so I don't know. How can someone who doesn't have a license get auto insurance? That doesn't really. How?
Yep, exactly. I don't know. You have to ask Vern Fonk because they insure people, and the general. They insure people that even if you're suspended, somehow they do it, but they make you pay a ton of money. Yeah,
Okay. Well, okay, that probably leads to other silly
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
If they're insuring people that are suspended, okay, no comment
Yep.
there, but
Nope.
that's a little
Yep.
that's unusual to say, to put it
Hmm.
lightly.
Yep.
That's strange. All right.
Very, very.
Next. But my I guess my concern, or I guess what I would really wonder is, I mean, I don't really I don't really know. I don't really see a time where like blind people would really have cars. I mean, would they become cheap enough for most blind people to afford? I don't know.